My name is Desmarais. I'm a candidate in the Instructional Technology Master's Program at Kennesaw State University. I've been teaching for 3 years total now and thoroughly enjoy my current position. I'm currently a special education teacher at McEachern High School and coach baseball as well. My role is teaching small group Algebra 1 and co-teaching math classes needed by my administrator. I love sharing my knowledge of mathematics with my students in a way that they can understand and use in their own studies. Since education is starting to incorporate technology more and more, I feel that the Instructional Technology program at KSU will fully equip me with the knowledge, skill, and disposition needed to be successful for my students. The title of my presentation is called The Flipped Classroom. A typical class looks like this. Students listen to the lesson in class and work outside of class. The flipped classroom has the students listen to the lesson outside of class and work in class. I chose this topic because I understand the value of doing self-learning and being able to make inferential conclusions on your own. The idea of this topic intrigued me enough to want to fully dip into trying out this idea. Having students do their personal best learning the material before entering the class so that the classroom time can be dedicated to discussions and activities with the teacher makes sense to me. The typical classroom is set up for students to work outside of class without a teacher. The flipped classroom puts more emphasis on learning inside the classroom rather than outside the classroom. The teacher can be used as a resource at school for the students compared to when the students are at home by themselves. The flipped classroom allows students more opportunities to learn within the framework of the school day. Next, we need to know what is a flipped classroom. According to EDUCAUSE, the flipped classroom is a pedagogical model in which the typical lecture and homework elements of a course are reversed. Short video lectures are viewed by students at home before the class session, while in-class time is devoted to exercises, projects, or discussions. Instead of doing homework like the traditional classroom setup, students would do their work in class with the teacher there as a resource. The purpose of this study is to find out if the flipped classroom has a major effect on student achievement, but more specifically, to increase student achievement compared to the traditional math class, promote more valuable discussion, and the completion of work. A traditional classroom has homework, and the majority of its practice is done outside of the classroom. The traditional classroom is what many people are used to, so they continue implementing the pedagogy. My school is no different, and I want to change in the culture and pedagogy of our math department. Problems that need to be addressed are seen in the slide. In a typical classroom, student engagement isn't as prevalent as it should be. The flipped classroom enables the engagement of students more because the class is centered on discussions, activities, and assignments. With the end of course pass rating of 57% for Algebra 1 students at our school, student understanding is another problem that needs assistance. Also, students have issues finishing their classwork, which becomes their homework in a traditional class. They need more teacher involvement, which is another issue we heard from. Because of the traditional classroom model, teacher involvement also suffers because a majority of the class time is spent teaching the material rather than hands-on learning. Students need guidance and open dialogue. They need to practice in school where they have the most essential resource, the teacher. My capstone project plan is fairly simple. Implement the flipped classroom pedagogy for one 2-week unit and compare the assessment scores to the traditional classroom. For this 2-week period, the students will be given video lectures to watch outside of class. They are encouraged to keep a record of key ideas that they have found watching the lecture. Students will write down important aspects of the lecture so that they can be discussed in class with the teacher and other students. The discussion time will be teacher-led, but students will guide the discussion based on the questions and key ideas that they have written down. With the students guiding the discussion, a major part of the learning will come from their curiosity of the material and ability to ask relevant questions. Once the discussion time comes to an end, students will begin working on the activity or assignment for the day individually or in groups depending on their preference. The teacher will be a facilitator of the activity or assignment by helping and understanding the step-by-step process for solving the equations. Students may use the available desktop computers for internet access. They can use their notes, iPads when they're available. They can use each other and the teacher. At the end of each class, the students will take a ticket out the door quiz. This data will help serve for differentiation purposes as well as data to help with future lessons. Each part is crucial for the pedagogy to be successful. The evaluation plan is also basic. Students will have taken a pre-assessment before the unit is to begin to get a baseline of their understanding. The pre-assessment data will be compared to the post-assessment data. This will be happening in two classes. One, the traditional classroom, and the other, the flipped classroom. The traditional classroom will have a lecture of the material, and the students will be working on the majority of their assignments at home with little help in class from the teacher based on the time. The flipped classroom has already been explained. I will be measuring the overall growth of the two classes as well as the ending achievement of each class. The capstone results can be seen in this slide. The flipped classroom mean score was a 25 on the pre-assessment and 79 on the post-assessment. The traditional classroom mean score was a 29 on the pre-assessment and 81 on the post-assessment. Overall, the flipped classroom grew by 54 percentage points, while the traditional classroom grew by 52 percentage points. Growth-wise, the flipped classroom wins. For overall student achievement, the traditional classroom wins the battle, having the higher mean score for the post-assessment. Some interesting findings from the experience were the barriers that had to be taken. My classroom was not used to the idea of the flipped classroom and struggled to do homework. I found the students have difficulty even watching video lectures at home and taking notes of the key ideas. As a result, students were unprepared coming into class, with only a few of the students who actually watched the lecture. For the beginning of the experience, the students were given a brief period of time at the beginning of class to watch the lecture on the projector and take their key notes for the discussion. This only happened at the beginning of the 2 weeks because the students were still unfamiliar with the pedagogy. Even after preparing the students weeks in advance for the experience, they were still unsure about how the classroom would look with the flipped classroom in effect. This hold-up put the experience behind a couple of days, but it was extremely helpful for my future endeavors with the pedagogy. Reflecting on my experience with the capstone, I can truly say that this has changed my perspective on the traditional classroom. Even with the results not being as high as I anticipated for the student achievement, the growth of students has shown me that this is an effective pedagogy. I took into consideration that my students were not used to the flipped classroom and needed time to adjust. Going further, I would like to see how my students would do on the next unit being accustomed to the procedure. It would be my assumption that they would show even more growth and student achievement would be higher than the traditional class. My students were able to briefly understand what it means to be a self-learner and ask questions that are relevant to their learning. It was fascinating watching my students walk into class prepared for the discussion. You could tell that their confidence was at an all-time high because they were able to be a part of the discussion and potentially ready to even teach to the class. The amount of time I was able to spend with my students was another factor I enjoyed. Usually my days can become mundane because I'm always teaching and lecturing on material. Having the freedom to have open dialogue with my students about the material they are trying to understand was relieving. The flipped classroom is a pedagogy that I would recommend to others. It is built around authentic, student-centered learning opportunities, and I look forward to using this pedagogy again in my future classes. Finally, these are the resources used for my research to benefit my capstone experience. Thank you.